All right, so we're going to look at a measurements of arcs, more specifically how to determine and measure an arc based off of length around the circle. So first and foremost, let's talk about circumference. So circumference is equal to 2 pi times the radius. This 2 pi comes from the measurement of the angle around a circle being 360 degrees or 2 pi radians. That's where that 2 pi comes from. And I'm mentioning that to you because we've seen in other videos how to convert between degrees and radians and how to go back and forth between that. We've seen that ratio of 2 pi equaling 360 degrees. And so that's actually where that comes from, though. And I'll make the arc length, which we'll look at very soon, that'll make understanding that a lot easier as well. So instead of writing that long word circumference, I'm going to do just the plain C equals 2 pi times the radius. And so let's do a couple of examples with that. Some of you may be very familiar with this, some of you may not at all. So that's why I want to do a couple of examples of finding the circumference of a circle. So remember that a radius, or what R stands for here, is defined by a line segment from the center to a point on the circle. All right. So let's say that this distance here from B to C, let's say that was 1 inch. Okay. So if that was 1 inch and I wanted to find the circumference, what I would do is I would say C equals 2 times pi times 1 inch, and I would end up with 2 pi inches, or approximately 6.28 inches. All right. Because all I have to do is substitute the value or the length of the radius into my formula, and I get 2 times pi times 1 inch in this instance. And that's just approximately 6.28 inches, or exactly 2 pi inches. Um, yeah, so that's the basis of a circumference. Well, let's look at some other examples. This time, let's say my distance is 0.5 meters. Okay, so if I were to find the circumference of this circle with a radius of 0.5 meters, well, I would just substitute the measurement of the radius in for r in my formula. So I end up with 2 times pi times 0.5, and that is equal to just pi, in this case meters, which would be approximately 3.14 meters. Now, a very common question is pi equal to 22 over 7? Is pi equal to 3.14? Should I just use pi in my calculator? And the answer, honestly, is up to whoever your boss is. So in your class, your teacher is your boss in that instance. And so they may tell you to use a certain thing. They may tell you it doesn't matter, just as long as I can understand that you use this for it. So like you put pi equals 22 over 7 somewhere in the beginning saying, hey, this is what I'm using. Or if you say pi is going to equal 3.14, or you're using pi as it is in your calculator. If you state that somewhere beforehand, if they don't ask, at least they'll know where you got your approximation from. If they told you to always use something else, then do that. But always just ask your boss, because especially if you're going to be using it a lot with your measurements, because you want to make sure that you keep things consistent all the way through. Personally, and when I was in school, we always used pi as whatever it was in our calculator. Okay, so that's that. And so to find circumference, you should do 2 times pi times the radius. Well, there are going to be instances where you aren't given the radius. You may be given the diameter instead. And that's fine. Because as we've discussed earlier, the diameter is just twice the radius. So if I have a point D here, BCD, or the line segment BD, is really just a diameter. It's a straight line. Let's pretend it's a straight line going through the center. Straight line segment going through the center. And so the diameter would just be twice the radius, or 2r here. So we would end up getting that pi times the diameter, or pi times d, is also the circumference. So if we're given a diameter instead, we could find the circumference still. So if I told you that this total distance across was a total of 10 centimeters for the diameter of the circle. I can substitute that in, and what I end up getting is pi, or 10 pi centimeters, which is approximately 31.4 centimeters. And that would be it. Okay? Of course, if I'm given the circumference, I can go back and find the diameter or the radius by solving for c. All right? So I will leave that up to you, because you have seen how to solve an equation before. The only difference here is that you have to divide by 2 pi or by pi. You're still just dividing by a number. You've done that before. So we will look at one example. So let's use this one, because I feel like this is the one that is most confusing for people at times. So let's say I am given a radius of 2 meters is my radius, and I need to, let's not say that. Let's say that the distance around, or the total circumference, let's say c equals 2 meters, and I need to find the radius. So if c equals 2 meters, I need to find a radius, or the circumference equals 2 meters, I need to find a radius. Then I know that this is also equal to 2 times pi times r. And so I would divide by 2 pi on both sides. And so I would get that 2 divided by 2 pi, or 1 over pi, would be the radius. Okay, and then I could put that in the calculator to approximate that value. All right, so that's circumference. So now let's look at, how do we use circumference, or the ideal of what circumference is, being just the 360 degrees, or 2 pi radians, times the radius. How do we use that idea to find out the measure of any arc? So just say for going from A to B, how do I find a measure of any arc?